Ladies and gentlemen, Philip Adams. Right, sir, a quick update for this visiting fireman on what happened in the 12 months since I've been away.
Well, can you get Tommy to play Nearer My God to Thee? Although the captain's on the bridge and can't see any icebergs, most of us think the country is sinking, and we're rapidly moving the deck chairs around the Titanic at the moment. So it's rather like England, isn't it, really?
Well, it's a lot worse there, actually. I mean, they're all coming over here, including me.
Mm.
I mean, it's a point, actually. I mean, when you think about it, in England at present, we're running at what now? 22% inflation? I mean, that's general through Europe. America's into, what, North America, 18% now?
Come on, we're not even trying, are
well, no,
we?
that's
We
right.
can do much better than...
Belly aching here, about 10%.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I think Goff's going to come back, if Trudeau's come back.
You reckon so?
Madam Gandhi's come back. I think Goff's return is imminent. Good on you, Goff.
Now, you've also, I know from a bit of reading I've been doing, you've been interesting yourself in recent months with a war against what you call the new nonsense.
I swore I wasn't going to do another talk show. A few weeks ago, I was booed by an entire audience of the Peter Couchman show, who yelled, "Take him off," and all the rest of it. Mind you, to them, TV stands for Take Valium. It's looking out into the audience at all the blue rinses made you feel quite seasick. But I was on with a large pneumatic Barbie doll, a woman of pneumatic appearance with scholastic implants and a huge sort of bouffant hairdo, whose name... And she was out here to solve all the murders in Australia simultaneously. She'd been doing it, she claimed, for the Los Angeles Police Department. She claimed, for instance, in a paranormal vision to have solved the Manson case and to have found the bodies. And when I got a bit heated, I was a bit cranky and tired. I think it was my time of the month or something. It was fairly unpleasant. I flounced off, swearing never to return. But you've got some nice people here. I don't think they take Valium, do they?
But what about this attack on the new nonsense? I mean, does it include not just people who claim to be able to discover the murderers and this sort of thing, the entire aspect of...
70% of American undergraduates believe in Eric von Daniken. Now, that might seem a fairly petty thing to worry about, but there's been a rush away from rationality in this century. It's meant to be a godless century, and yet this has been the era of isms, of fascism, communism, monetarism, all sorts of lovely ideologies. But deeper than that, at the moment, everyone's rushing away to cults and to fantasies, and whether it's UFOs or what have you. There's an underlying, I think, significance to it all. The people are despairing, the Damoclean swords are clustering. There's, you know, the environmental risk, there's the threat of nuclear war, there's the whole religious turmoil in the world today. And people are rushing away from the orthodox beliefs to very unorthodox beliefs. Now, I think the questioning is always interesting, in fact quite poignant. Human beings should ask questions. The thing that is tragic is the banality of the answers. People are following any two-bob guru. Now, for instance, you and I tonight could start a new religion.
Could we?
Yeah, easily. Now, when you were playing cricket, I was going to Downing Flake, a great Australian institution which made donuts. And up on the wall, there was a thing called the Philosopher's Creed. And it said, it's very beautiful, you may wish to take notes. As you wander on through life, brother, whatever be your goal, keep your eye upon the donut and not upon the hole. Now, that's very beautiful.
It's moving.
Now, it's also very sensible.
Yes.
Now, if you took a von Daniken line, you'd say, OK, UFOs are unidentified flying donuts. Take the old paintings with halos. Well, they could be rendered into donuts. Now, you and I could wear donuts on our fingers, and if we walked through Martin Place, a couple of million people would follow us. Because the rat baggier the notion, the more eagerly it's embraced. And finally, it's insidious. Finally, if you're irrational about things like this, you're ultimately irrational about everything. Mm. How can you make political judgments if you believe in theories? Mm. I mean, no one believes in politics. The irony is, of course, no one believes in politicians. No one believes in anything except nonsense. Mm.
But what about, I mean, people would argue back to you. I mean, I wouldn't be one of them, because I would generally find myself on your side, actually. But people would say that there have been sort of paranormal happenings, if you like, which are proven. What would your attitude be toward that? I mean, can you give examples?
Well, I've got a standing $10,000 prize to anyone who'll show me any paranormal phenomenon that's scientifically demonstrable. No one's taken the money. You might remember that poor old Houdini, who was desperate to get in touch with his departed mother, being a sort of a Portnoy, never happened. No one ever took the dough. Many people tried, but he was able very effortlessly to show that it was fraud. Scientists are often gulled. Uri Geller, for quite some time, gulled a lot of very respectable scientists. It It was a magician called the Great Randy, no pun intended, who in fact who took Galaron and demonstrated that all of it was fairly fraudulent. Now, I have in fact seen a boy bending metal in front of me. He is being investigated scientifically. And I've made the promise before, I'll make it again. I will bare my bum in Burke Street, and that would be an awe-inspiring sight, if in fact he can do it. But I do not believe that even the simplest things like telepathy have been proven. People think it's proven.
There have been some fairly high-level experiments in that, haven't there? I mean,
yes,
governments have been involved in them.
Well, yes, some curious people. The Rhine College is the most famous. The Rhine College, first of all, paranormal investigation is now 100 years old, almost exactly. The Society for Psychical Research started about 100 years ago. Now, the Rhine College was always the bastion in the world for such experiments, simple experiments in precognition and telepathy. Unfortunately, the Rhine College has been kicked out of its university. Almost all its findings have now been disqualified under new sorts of statistical analysis. Now, for instance, tonight, if we had the time, I could produce one member of this audience who always guessed the toss of a coin accurately.
You mean the audience watching?
Watching or hearing.
Yeah.
We could produce it after let's say it was very simple, like toss a coin, and we call heads or tails. At the end of the first round, 50% would drop out. And so you'd go through the entire Australian population. At the end of that, one Australian would have done it right every time. That would seem to be, obviously, a demonstration of paranormal abilities. The Rhine College kept producing these people. But they're statistically inevitable that they will be produced. Someone has to do it by that funnel of numbers, but they can never do it again. Now, I don't think it's fair to say that any of these things are proven. Now, I'm quite happy to believe if it's demonstrated. One has to be an agnostic about these things. I regard the terms paranormal and supernatural as tautologies. If things exist, they're not para, they are normal. If things exist in nature, they're not supernatural, they're natural.
But I mean, having said all that, and having said also that generally I agree with you, I mean, surely you, because I have had something happen to you that's inexplicable.
But statistically, once again, that's inevitable. Every time I've ever bought an aeroplane ticket, I've always, at one onion layer, thought this one's going to go down. I've flown on thousands of aircraft and none of them have. One day, one of them will. All of us suddenly think that a dear friend or a relative is going to die. We forget when they don't. If they do, it is absolutely the most central event in a human life. Barry Jones is well known to viewers. He's a dear old friend of mine. He's a federal member of Parliament. And I remember, Barry's well into this. He really is a believer. And we were in Vienna together. And Barry gave me a lot of evidence, which I thought was quite attractive. I was, a bit this way and that. And as we climbed onto the aeroplane together, I remember Barry's large bottom freezing in front of me and wobbling a little. And he said, I'm not going to get on this plane, it's going to crash. I had a vision. And I thrust his buttocks firmly. I've never had a more serene flight. I was just totally assured it was going to be okay. When we got back to Australia, Barry gave me a book, which for the first time in my life shook me. And I published an article about it. I was so impressed with the book, I was sure that I'd finally found some solid evidence. It takes a minute, but let me tell you about it. Two women who were, in fact, headmistresses from a women's college at Oxford visited the Palace of Versailles in the early part of the century, just wandered in as tourists, didn't know a lot about it, they said. As they wandered around, they saw women in crinolines. They saw people in strange costumes. They felt a bit odd and a bit weird. They didn't talk about it at the time, but when they got back to their hotel in Paris, did you see what I saw? I think I did. Let's not talk about it. Let's write our separate accounts. They wrote accounts of what they'd seen. They didn't tell anybody about this, but they spent the rest of their lives investigating that experience. Now, for instance, the book they published in the 30s by Faber, a legitimate publisher, amazing things emerged. They'd walked over a bridge which doesn't exist in Versailles now. As far as anyone knew, it had never existed. They researched it. Guess what? At the time of the kings and the queens, shortly before the Bastille, it had been there. There had been a door in that wall. Yes, people had green costumes. They were gardeners on loan from the Spanish court. On and on and on it went. Astonishing. They finally published, and the work was clearly a work of deep passion and integrity. There was no way it wasn't true. So I wrote about it. And Lady Lindsay, the author of Picnic at Hanging Rock, who's always been trying to convert me, said, that's the book that influenced me in writing Picnic at Hanging Rock. So I said, well, look, looks like I've got to start struggling out of the jeans in Burke Street. And a couple of days later, a book turned up called The Ghost of Versailles Revisited by Lucille Ironmonger, who, as you know, is a distinguished British historian. She'd grown up with those two ladies, had always believed the story, and was in fact their literary executor, so that she got the documents. She decided to update it. She went through the documents and found some astonishing things. She found that the women had in fact spent their life researching, but had updated the experience in terms of what they discovered. In other words, if they found people wore funny green costumes, do you remember that? And they'd go back and they'd rewrite the original experience, not consciously fraudulent at any time. It was just their life revolved about this event. Ironmonger went further. She said, OK, everything in the book they discovered and they remembered in retrospect, if you like, wisdom of hindsight. But she said something must have happened. There must have been a basis for it. So she did some research and she found that a group of transvestites, who were in fact friends of Oscar and Bosie, of Lord Alfred Douglas, had lived next door to Versailles and had a key that let them into the park. And it was their practice on certain days to dress up in lovely robes and to ponce around as Marie Antoinette. The women had seen something, but from that they'd extrapolated. Now it's this extrapolation that occurs which is dangerous. If you believe in one thing, there's a tendency for the intellectual dominoes to fall, and suddenly people believe in everything. It even gets into cancer quackery. People are so angry about authoritarian structures that they see even orthodox cancer treatment as authoritarian. So a Milan brick or a fraud is, you know, what's that apricot kernel stuff, Latrale, all these fake cures emerge. And I've seen many people on television who have claimed to be cured by a Melbourne psychiatrist who's in the business of curing cancer through meditation. And I have known, as Nigel Gray has known, who runs the anti-cancer clinic, that they're going to die, that they're in remission. And it goes on and on. If we start disbelieving in everything that authority tells us, well, I like questioning authority, but scientific authority is not a right-wing plot, and medical authority is not some sort of cynical exercise of the public.
But there is, of course, I mean, again, while agreeing with all that, there is something to be said, is there not, for some form of quackery, which gives somebody who's a terminal cancer patient, say, a few blissful months where he believes that perhaps he might exist.
Nigel Gray agrees with that, and in fact says that what the fellow has done in Melbourne is to teach doctors that they're not really doing enough in doctoring. In other words, because of the immensity of the cancer problem, cancer patients are often treated like people on a cattle truck, where this guy, and in fact Milan Brick and other quacks, have the ability to relate emotionally to the patient and give them that special sort of moment. That's the justification, I suppose, for religious belief, full stop, that it helps people through their traumas. I personally prefer to live without delusions and without crutches.
You don't believe, of course, in life after death?
No, I think that's one of the great epic works of human imagination, like Christianity. I think that everything is based, in fact, on fear of death. Our science, our religion, our art. Woody Allen makes the point that every time he works, or Michelangelo worked, it was an attempt to deny the reality of death. Now, oddly enough, someone like me, who doesn't believe in anything, is far less likely to kill someone for heresy or blasphemy. I'm the last person to be an Ayatollah. At the moment, it is the conviction of religious belief, not just at the moment, I would suggest for centuries, that is really causing most of the pain and anguish on this planet. Brands of Christianity bash each other to death in Belfast.
But that's only one
Brands
aspect.
of Islam are doing it in London at the moment.
Yes. But I mean, that's only one aspect of prejudice, isn't it? I mean, and one aspect of religion. I mean, that's the sharp tip of it, if you like. Beneath it is an institution, which again gives great...
It's produced some very fine cathedrals and some
great
quite
art.
Interesting pyramids.
Some great music.
Great music and so on. But I don't think it's yet proven that a humanist view can't produce that. I suspect that many of the great religious artists were not, in fact, religious at all.
I mean, what did communism ever produce?
Well, communism is, of course, a religion. You know, I've made this point very often. The Catholic Church had the Vatican, the communists had the Kremlin. The Catholic Church had the Old and New Testament. The Catholic Church, the Communist Party had Karl Marx and Lenin. The Catholic Church had to cope with the Reformation. The Kremlin had to cope with, for instance, Mao Zedong, or if you like, Dubček in Prague. Both organisations have parallel sort of disciplines on people. They've got the same hostility to sexuality, which is fascinating. The Communist Party and the Catholic Church both hate and disapprove of homosexuality, abortion, etc., etc. The parallels are profound. But every belief, in fact, goes back to that nub, I don't want to be dead. And anyone who can offer them any version of life after death will get a following. The tragedy in Guyana with, what's his name, Jones.
Jones, yes.
Everyone thinks that's hideous and appalling. But the only difference between a cult And a major religion is its tenure in office and the numbers who pursue it.
Well, was it that search for life after death which led you in your youth to dally with the Communist Party?
Of course.
Was it?
Well, I couldn't believe in God. God knows I tried. On many a sort of a storm-tossed night, I'd stand on a lofty hill and say, send down a thunderbolt. I would have been quite grateful to have died. At least it would have given me a chance afterwards. But no, it was that lack of values that came out of that that led me first to communism and hence to other strange attitudes. But that's the world's experience. That is happening in macrocosm in our century.
What fascinates me about that point in your life was, I mean, you were brought up fairly conventionally, were you not?
My father was a congregational minister.
Yes. What was his attitude toward?
Didn't see much of Dad, actually. My father had very little influence on it. It wasn't because of him being religious at all. I lived pretty much a solitary childhood with my grandparents. It really was the contradiction of going to school and being told in one lesson that someone can walk on water, raise the dead, divvy up loaves and fishes with an almost Malcolm Fraserish ability, and yet to be told in the next period that 1 and 1 made 2, and there were things like chemistry and physics. That paradox is simply not solved in our society. And out of the schizophrenia comes the danger.
But have you found, though, like most people as they get older, that you move more toward the right wing?
I think the left wing is moving away from me. When I was in the left, it was a quixotic, romantic organisation. It was full of people who were motivated, and this will sound maudlin. I remember Frank Hardy used this word and you gave him a terrible time. But they were fundamentally motivated by love. It was a movement informed by compassion and caring. Too much of the left, to me now, is motivated by hatred. I don't see the humour or the humanity much in the left now. There's something about the left which just reminds me awfully much of Nuremberg and of that period. Now, that's not a blanket statement. I meet people every day who are doing astonishing things at the coalface of human misery, who are really trying very hard. But it's the ideologues, the slogan chanters, the people that won't admit to contradiction or to complexity that terrify me.
And you see that as a growing movement here in Australia?
Well, it's a growing movement everywhere.
Yes.
Most people reduce social problems to slogans, and that's simply too simple.
So then if you look forward then into the future, what do you see?
I see further disintegration for quite some time. I think it's a huge subject to open. I think mass society is disintegrating. Mass media will in fact disintegrate in the next 10 or 15 years. There'll be a plethora of subcultures. Instead of mass television, we'll have video disc, cartridge, 100 options through cable or satellite. So it won't be what Talbot Duck Manton wants us to see, or my dear friend Mr. Packer. It'll be what we want to see. Now, this will allow us to follow our own pursuits. But the danger, of course, in multiculturalism of this sort is that the notion of nation or of community solidarity will just fall apart. There'll be Hare Krishna television channels and all sorts of funny things will emerge. So there'll be riches and human diversity, which at the moment are in peril as McDonald's and Jumbo Jet stride the world with the Hilton hotels in their slipstream. But that tendency to uniformity is just going to fall apart. Now, it's not terrifying, it's interesting, it's exhilarating. But as long as people think it through a bit and base their judgments on knowledge rather than what I regard as a new wave of superstition. For instance, Superman has just come back as a movie. Do you realise that Superman is a restatement of the the New Testament?
I never thought of it that way.
What do you think about it? Superman came in the Depression years of the 30s. It came back in our Depression years now. You see a light in the sky, a star in the sky. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You follow that, and there in a wheat field is a sort of a little broken cradle, certain shades of Bethlehem. A childless couple discover this kid. Her name is Mary. They raise this super child, as Joseph and Mary did. Keeping it quiet is really ours, no mention of being cosmic cuckolds. And at a certain point, this child is launched on humanity to fix everything. So the popular culture is full of signals about what people are thinking about and fearing. The flying saucer movies in the 50s during the Cold War, we waited for death to rain from the sky. Suddenly the flying saucer phenomenon erupted. In 1947, bang, it happened then. You can date it to the minute, the first sighting. The flying saucer movies in the 50s were all terrifying. They were monsters coming to destroy us. When they came back a couple of years ago in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they came back as benevolent, as loving creatures who are going to fix all our problems. Don't worry, no problems. We'll fix it. What is that? It is cargo cult. It is what the natives do throughout New Guinea and the Pacific. You acquiesce. You wait for this mystical aeroplane to arrive and solve your problems. Very dangerous, Michael.
Philip, I'm not quite sure I've understood everything you've said, but but it has been said as usual with all the elegance and style for which you are renowned. Philip Adams, thank you very much.
Bye.